Genocide, racism, crimes against humanity, all in the midst of a pandemic as we look forward to the Olympic Games. Hello, my name is Conner Masur. I'm a student at San Jose State University studying sports management and culture due to my interest in the intersection of sport and activism. The Olympic Games is one of the greatest examples of this intersection. But before we delve into the issues, let me educate you a little on the structure of the Games. The International Olympic Committee is the main governing body of the Olympics. Their fight for the protection of human rights landed them a position on the UN as an observer, and their fourth fundamental principle states that the practice of sport is a human right. Through sport, the IOC has been a platform for social change. However, the Games maintain a delicate balance between 206 different nations, in part through Olympic Rule 50, which you can see on the slide. The idea of the Olympic paradox stems from this rule being used to punish athletes for protesting current issues at the Games. My first example of this comes from the 1968 Summer Olympics in Mexico City. On the right, we have Tommy Smith and John Carlos. Their fists are raised and their heads are bowed to protest the racism and human rights violations in the US. Unfortunately, they were removed from the Games and had their medals taken away for about 50 years until they were finally celebrated by the IOC. Vera Shaslaska, a Czechoslovakian gymnast, was a different case. Shaslaska had to share the first place podium with a Russian gymnast, and when the award ceremony began and the Russian flag was raised, she bowed her head in protest, not for having to share the podium, but in protest of the Soviet Union's invasion of her country. Vera was celebrated for this gesture and even became an elected official back in her country. But why were there different outcomes? In this case, the issue is context. The IOC is dominated by European countries, so at the time, the invasion of Czechoslovakia was understood and the countries were able to empathize. However, for Smith and Carlos, the world didn't understand the racism in the US. Their message was not received, and it was interpreted as an act of aggression. The second example is Kathy Freeman and Damian Hooper. They are both Aboriginal Australian athletes who represented their country at different Olympic Games. Kathy Freeman, on the right, carried a torch at the 2000 Sydney Games as a track athlete, while Damian Hooper on the left represented Australia in the boxing ring during the 2012 London Games. So you can see that they're both displaying the Aboriginal flag, a flag not recognized by the Australian National Olympic Committee. And therefore, it makes it subject to Rule 50 as a political gesture. Damian Hooper had to apologize and swear to never wear the flag into the ring again. Kathy Freeman was a different case, however. She was chosen to carry the torch at the 2000 Sydney Games to represent a culture that was being suppressed in Australia. Not only did she do that, but she also placed gold in her event, ran a victory lap displaying the Aboriginal flag as she celebrated. So, why was Kathy celebrated whereas Damian wasn't? The difference was in the ritual. The Olympic ritual is the foundation of the delicate relations between nations at the Games. It is very sacred to the IOC that took a century to develop, so that way when athletes managed to place in their events, they would be respected, celebrated, and honored without disrespecting any other countries. The victory lap that Freeman took was in no violation of the careful ritual that was developed. And she was also specifically chosen to represent a group that was being mistreated by the Australian government. Freeman was subject to the Lost Generation, a group of Indigenous citizens who were stripped of their culture, names, and languages to forget their Aboriginality. This was the IOC's careful way of telling Australia to change their treatment of their Indigenous citizens. Now that you have some understanding of the past, the future of the Games raises a few questions. The next Winter Olympics will be hosted in Beijing 2022. In Beijing, this is an issue because the Chinese government is labeling their Muslim population as extremists and have placed over 1 million into re-education camps where they are used as a labor force as punishment for their faith. How can a country that is committing crimes against humanity, mass genocide, host the Olympic Games, an organization that stands for common humanity? This wasn't known when the IOC voted, and by the time they found out, it had been too late to change locations. Thomas Bach, the current president of the IOC, must uphold the first duty of the Olympics, and that is to provide the Olympics to the athletes from the 200 plus countries who have trained to compete. But what can we expect from these games? Can we expect athletes to protest the current state of the world? What would happen if they did protest? Punishment wouldn't only come from the IOC, but what happens when athletes speak out against China? These are questions that I do not have answers yet. But with more time and research, I will hopefully be able to speak more on this topic. Once again, my name is Conner Masur. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.